Let's go ahead and take out our Bibles and turn to the book of Mark. Turning to the book of Mark, we'll finish up chapter 5 today, doing a verse-by-verse study, going through there. And we're looking at verse 21 through 43 today. I've titled the message today, 24/7. And the reason I entitled it that, 24/7 is a concept of all-encompassing. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time, just all-encompassing. And what we have in the story today is two people who have issues going on in their life that are completely all-encompassing, consuming them. In one of the stories, we have a man or a woman who has had an issue of blood for 12 years, and that issue has not stopped. And it has wrecked her life, it has wrecked her health, it has destroyed her finances, and it has brought her to a place of complete brokenness where she is coming to the end of herself and reaching out to Jesus for a healing. In the other part of the story, we have a young girl who is at the point of death, and the father comes to Jesus and begs him to heal that daughter. And in each of these cases, we have people that are really just coming to the end of themselves. They have something that, you have a problem in your life and it's all consuming. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's all you can think about. 12 years of an issue of blood. 12 years of a young girl growing. And then finally coming to a place of dying. But there's another number that we use in the Bible, that we see in the Bible over and over again. The number 7. It talks about completeness. Talks about bringing somebody to a place of completeness, a place of being whole again. They were once broken and kind of a half of a person, and then they come to a place of wholeness. And only God can bring that in our lives. Only God, no matter what issue, what plague, what sickness, what illness you have in your life, only God can bring you to that place of complete wholeness and wellness. And so as we begin there, in verse 21, it says, "Now when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him and was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, 'My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her that she may be healed, and she will live.' Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now a certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years, and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment, for she said, 'If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well.'" Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for your word this morning. We thank you for your Holy Spirit, Lord, and the power of your Holy Spirit to come into our lives and make us whole again, or make us whole for the first time. Lord, we know that it's only in your hands that we can be made whole, that we can be made complete. Lord, that any problem that we might be going through, no matter how severe, you can heal these things, Lord. You can bring us to a place of wholeness, Lord. And so we ask this morning that your Spirit would fall upon each of us as we study your word, as we look into your word, that you would wash us with the water of your word. Lord, wash away those areas of our lives that are all consuming, that we can't take our minds off of. Lord, that we would come to the end of ourselves and give those things over to you, and that you would heal us, mind, body, and spirit. We thank you for these things. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, well, 24/7. Well, if you're a football fan, and I am, you've probably heard this week of a tragedy. Junior Seau, a man who was in the NFL for almost 20 years, went to the Pro Bowl 12 times. He wasn't just a football player. He wasn't just a good football player. He was one of the best for many, many years. And you might have heard this week he took his own life. After being out of the NFL for a couple of years, things just fell apart in his life, and for some reason, we don't know why, he ended his life earlier this week. And you see there on the right a picture of his mother, just devastated, hours after the news of her son taking his own life. Something was going on in his life. Something that was all-consuming. Something that he just couldn't get away from. Something that day after day after day it ate at him and just brought him to a place of saying, I've got to end this. I've got to end this somehow, some way. I've got to get out from underneath this. And I think in the lives of every human being, we go through trials, we go through struggles, we go through illnesses, we go through things that become so all-consuming that we either come to the end of ourselves and surrender those things to Jesus, and we cry out to him, and we reach out for the hem of his garment and ask him to set us free from those things. Or we come to the end of ourselves in the sense of ending ourselves. Or we come to a man-made Band-Aid, and we find some false religion or something that just will fill that void temporarily, whether it be alcohol or drugs or false religions or whatever it might be. There's really no other way around that. We got to come to the end of ourselves. We've got to come to a place of brokenness. We've got to come to a place of humility and just reach out to the Lord. And that's what I see in the lives of these two people here. The father, distraught. My daughter is dying. The light of my life, my only daughter, for 12 years has come to a point of death. She's going to die. If you don't come, she's going to die. And then she ends up dying in the story. And we'll look at that. Another woman, 12 years of her life is spent in darkness, seclusion, as she has this issue of blood. In that society, she would have been totally ostracized. Her husband probably would have left her because she was ceremonially unclean and unclean to touch. We don't know exactly what was going on in her family life, but we know that she came to the end of her money. She came to the end of everything and reached out for Jesus in that way. And so, in this story, Jesus, ministering to this woman with the issue of blood, says to her in verse 34, Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. Go in peace. Again, only Jesus can bring that wholeness. Only Jesus can take whatever situation you're in. And he doesn't necessarily heal our physical needs, but he can bring us to a place of being able to deal with those things so that we're leaning on him and not constantly obsessed with what is going on in our life, but we're able, through his strength, to overcome those things in our life. He says, go in peace and be whole of thy plague. Well, as we go back over these verses together, 24/7, 12 years of darkness in the life of this woman with the issue of blood, and 12 years of light of this little girl who's passed away. Coming to the end of yourself is really how I saw both of these people. In the first verses there, in verse 21, Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side. Remember, he had been over working with the demoniac on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and now he's going back over to the other side to the area where he lives and the area he's done most of his ministering in, the Galilee region. And as he comes to that area, a man meets him there. A great multitude meets him first, but within that multitude, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet and begged him earnestly, saying, My daughter lies at the point of death. You've got to come. He falls at his knees and begs Jesus. And this is so amazing to me. If you recall, a couple of chapters ago, in chapter 3, we saw Jesus in a synagogue. Now, we don't know if it's the same synagogue, but certainly Jesus has been going to synagogues all around this region. And for the most part, they have rejected him. And that's why Jesus is out in the wilderness areas, because the synagogue rulers have said, get out of here. We don't want you here. You want to come in here and heal people on the Sabbath? We don't want you here. You don't fall in line with our religious dogma. Go away. Get out. We don't want you here. Now, we don't know if this individual was one of those men, but certainly we know, if you look back just a couple of pages there, in chapter 3, in verse 6, it says, Then the Pharisees, this is after Jesus healed the man with the withered hand, and he told him to stretch out his hand, and they said, you can't do that on the Sabbath day. That goes against our religious teaching. Well, Jesus did it anyway, and then he turned and looked at them. Because of the hardness of their hearts, they didn't want to have somebody healed on that Sabbath day. It's an interesting point, isn't it? Now that we have a ruler from that synagogue, at Jesus' feet, begging, please heal my daughter. All that religious dogma seems to go out the window when your life is in turmoil, doesn't it? When your life is at the end, when you're desperate, all that religious dogma just goes right out the window and you just cry out to Jesus, help me. I don't care about all of that other stuff. It doesn't mean anything. When it comes to the point of life and death, it just doesn't mean anything. Well, in verse 6 there in chapter 3, it says, then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. And so we know at this time, religious rulers were coming to Jesus to trip him up. They were coming to him to try to make him say something wrong so that they might accuse him, so that they might destroy him. And they're making alliances with all kinds of people. And so we have to assume that at least this man Jairus knew about those things. But it's amazing now he's coming and falling at the feet of Jesus. He's come to the end of himself. He come to the end of who he is and what he is. I don't care about being a Pharisee anymore. I don't care about being a ruler of a synagogue anymore. If they throw me out, they throw me out. I just don't care. I just want my daughter to be healed. I want my daughter to come back. I don't want to see my daughter die. And I'll give up whatever it takes to come to that place. I know I'll be ostracized by my religious buddies over there in the Sanhedrin down in Jerusalem. I know I'll probably be kicked out of the synagogue, but I don't care anymore. I know that this man Jesus told a man to stretch out his hand after he had a withered hand his whole life. Maybe Jairus was standing right there when that hand came out. And when his daughter began to die, he said, I know there's one man that can take care of this problem. I've got to go to Jesus. And that's what he does. It's amazing. Well, in verse 23 there, he begged him earnestly, saying, my daughter lies at the point of death. Now, if you go back and look at Matthew, Matthew's account says, he said, my daughter has died. And of course, later on in the story today, people come and say, hey, she has died. And so there's no contradiction there. It's just a matter of when Matthew heard it and when Mark was told it happened. And so different points of view in the story there. But he says the point there is, come and lay your hands on her that she may be healed and she will live. So Jesus went with him, and the great multitude followed, and there was just thronging. And you've been in a big crowd before. You don't move very quickly when you're in a large crowd, do you? Especially when you've got people, you're at the center of that crowd, and I don't know if you've ever been there, I haven't, but you can just imagine people trying to pull you this way. Here, you come and heal me. No, you come and heal me. My daughter's over here. Come and heal her. And that crowd was not allowing Jesus to move very quickly, certainly. But Jesus says, okay, I'll go with you. But then he stopped at verse 25 there. A certain woman had a flow of blood for 12 years and had suffered many things from many physicians. She had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. She had used all the means that she had at her disposal to take care of this problem. She had done everything that she could to take care of this problem. And yet still, she was not able. She was not able. I want you to hold your place there for just a minute and turn back over to Hebrews. Hebrews tells us something very incredible about faith. Of course, Hebrews 11 is that great Hall of Faith chapter. Hebrews 11:6. It says there, without faith, it is impossible to please him. It actually says, but without faith. I should add that in because it's very important. Because in the book of Hebrews here, the writer is telling us, by faith, this person did this. By faith, this person did this. By faith, by faith, by faith, by faith. And then in verse 6, but without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Diligently seeking after him. And that's what you see in this man. Diligently seeking after Jesus. Ready to throw away everything. Throw away who he was. His position. Diligently seeking after him. This woman. Now, some kind of paint the picture that she's crawling to Jesus, and maybe at some point she was crawling to Jesus. But in another place, it kind of talks about her kind of falling down before him. So it seems like more she's standing. But certainly a weak woman like this, in such a weak state, after having 12 years of a continual flow of blood, she was not healthy. And to try to make her way through that crowd would have been very, very difficult. But she made her way through that crowd. She was willing to sacrifice whatever it took to get to Jesus. And so without faith, it's impossible to please him. You must believe that he is, but it says you also must believe that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek after him. And then it goes on to talk about Noah. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. And it goes on to talk about more of the heroes of our faith. You think about what Noah had to give up. Noah, I want you to build a boat. I know it's never rained before, but I need you to build this massive boat and get every animal on the earth into it. And you know, the first day when you order the lumber and everything, it's okay. Okay, I've got faith. I can do this. You get the lumber order in there, but then 120 years later, Lord, are you sure this is going to happen? I'm not sure. Are you sure this is going to go down like you told me? You begin to doubt. But wow, what he had to give up. The reputation. He had to give up his reputation. He had to give up everything. He became the laughingstock of that community and probably the whole known world. It was probably a tourist attraction, you know. Hey, let's go and check over that boat, man. This guy thinks it's going to float someday. Probably people just all over the place just making fun of him and laughing at him. But he gave it all up. He gave up who he was, and he went in a totally different direction and said, God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. If you say it's going to rain, you say it's going to flood and you're going to destroy the earth, and you want me to build this boat to save everyone, I'll do it. He gave it all up. It's amazing. By faith he did that. He diligently sought after the Lord. Now turning back over to Mark, another thing that we can see in the life of this woman and in this man, there are just some real key principles here. You know, if we want to seek after the Lord diligently, you know, there are no formulas to get healed. And I hope you know that. There are no magical sayings that you can say, and we'll see at the end of this story where Jesus says to the little girl, Talitha kume, you know, rise. I say to you, little girl, arise. That's not a magical incantation. Reaching out and touching the hem of Jesus' garment is not a magical formula for healing. There are no formulas. But we understand through the things that we see here that certainly these people have the right heart as they approach the Lord, as they are seeking diligently after the Lord. We see them doing some things that are very important for us all to remember. Some keys. And that's, first of all, worshiping in his presence. Just acknowledging who he is. Coming to that place of realizing he can do everything. There's nothing too hard for him. He's the creator of the heavens and the earth, and I'm going to worship him because he is worthy to be worshiped. I'm going to fall down at his feet and worship him in his presence, seeking after his presence diligently. We see that. We see a humbling of ourselves, sincerely coming and just sitting at his feet and humbling ourselves before him. We also see crying out to God, crying out with a fervent prayer, an earnest expectation, an earnest conviction that God is able to do this. You know, our convictions and our fervency kind of wanes depending on the situation, doesn't it? Somebody comes up to you and says, boy, I really got a cold this week, and I'm just not really feeling good. Oh, let me pray for you, brother. God, I just pray you heal their cold. Praise the Lord. Amen. You know, somebody comes up and says, hey, I've got cancer, and I'm dying. I'm in stage 3 cancer. Oh, Lord. Jesus. I mean, we go into that fervency then, don't we? But, you know, it shouldn't really change. God can do anything, regardless of what it is. We need to pray to him with the same fervency, regardless. For the little things, for the big things. For the flow of blood, for, you know, I hit my finger with a hammer today, and it really hurts. Pray to God acknowledging who he is and in fervency, just seeking after him. And then finally to have faith with no doubting. And that's what Jesus tells this man as they come to him and they say, hey, don't bother him anymore. Your daughter is dead. Oh, there's faith. Faith's gone now. No hope now. What did Jesus say to him? He says, hey, you keep on believing. You came to me believing I could heal your daughter. You keep on believing. Don't be afraid. You keep on believing. Having no doubt. And James talks about that quite a bit. He says, let him ask in faith. If you want wisdom, if you want something from God, if you're desperately crying out to him and humbling yourself before him, and you come to him and you make your request known to him, you don't doubt. You don't waver in that. You just keep believing that God can do all things. Let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Don't be a double-minded person. You come to God and you ask. I remember at the end of my career in the Navy, I was praying. You know, I had this very heavy sense that God was calling me to go into the ministry, but I didn't know how it was going to happen. I didn't know how God was going to open the doors to make it happen. And so I was wavering. I was thinking, well, maybe I should stay in the Navy for a couple more years until, you know, the plan comes together. Maybe I should just hang on for 24 years instead of 20, and I'll make rank and everything will be good, and then I'll get out of the Navy, and then I'll go into the ministry. And so I was praying to God. I was praying, Lord, you know, show me the whole plan. Paint that whole picture so I know exactly how it's all going to work out. And he directed me right to this verse right here. He said, you're double-minded. You're praying to me for wisdom. You're praying for me for this issue in your life. You're praying about this thing, and I'm giving you the answer, but all you're doing is wavering back and forth. And he was giving me the answer. He was saying, get out of the Navy. Retire from the Navy right now. Don't worry about step 2. I'll let you know about step 2 when it's time. Don't be double-minded. You're praying for wisdom. I'm giving you the wisdom. Now take that first step of faith. Step out there, and I'll show you the rest of the plan as you go. But, you know, it's hard to do that in life, isn't it? It's hard to just take that step of faith. Step off that cliff and not know what's going to happen. Quit your job. Do whatever. It's a difficult thing to do. But that's what God calls us to do. He wants us to diligently seek after him, trust him, ask him, and then believe that he's going to pave the way for us. That's what faith is all about. Go order the lumber, Noah. I'll take care of the rest. I'll take care of the rain. You just order the lumber. Start building. All right. Well, it's interesting here again. We're at the point of death. In the life of this woman, we're at the point of death in the life of this little girl. And you know, I think that oftentimes that's the best time to talk to somebody. Because we're so prideful. We're so arrogant. We're so, I can take care of myself. I've got money. I've got a plan. I've got intelligence. I can provide for myself. I can do the things that I need to do to care for my own needs. And we never come to God until something tragic happens in our life. And God knows that about us. And so, you know, you might think it's kind of a cop-out. Oh, this person's going through a really hard time. You know, somebody just passed away in their life, or now they've got a disease, or now they're in prison, or whatever. Oh, well, they just accepted the Lord because they were going through that hard time. Well, it's because they came to that place in their life of brokenness. They came to that place in their life where nothing is working. And I've messed it up so bad. My life is a disaster. And now I've got nowhere else to turn. I've got no other plans. You know, we've talked about Jacob in that light, the deceiver, the heel catcher. And I was going to have you turn back over to Genesis 32, but you can see that story there, where he comes to that place where Laban is fast approaching, or he's behind him. He can't turn around and go back towards the direction of Laban, because Laban said, hey, Mizpah, you don't pass this point, and I won't pass this point either. You just stay on that side, and I'll stay on this side, because you and I don't get along too well anymore. So he starts heading back over, and lo and behold, here comes brother Esau, and Esau wants to kill him. And he's come to this place of, I got nowhere else to run. I've got nowhere else to go. I have no other schemes that I can use. And in that situation, he begins to cry out to the Lord and say, Lord, you blessed me so much. And he kind of starts giving in to the Lord a little bit. But then, after he prays to him, he starts saying, all right, I need to appease Esau somehow. And so he tells his servants, now you go out with this wave of stuff and give it to him and say, Jacob's coming and all this stuff's for you. And here comes another wave of stuff. And he gives away everything he has. Almost. He's giving away all this stuff as a backup plan. As a backup plan, and then the Lord shows up, starts wrestling with him there. And finally, the Lord touches his hip, and he won't let him go, though. He says, Lord, you got to bless me. You got to bless me. Don't leave. I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. Realizing that he's in a real predicament. He's come to the end of himself. He's tapped out. He said, okay, you got me. I got nowhere else to run. Bless me. I need that blessing from you. And at that point, that's when the Lord says, your name's not Jacob anymore, heel catcher, deceiver. Your name is now Israel, governed by God. Your name is now changed because you've come to that place of brokenness. You've come to that place of just being completely wiped out and having nowhere else to run. And all you can do is say, God, bless me. God, take care of my needs. I'm crying out to you right now. I need you. And God says, that's where I want you to be. Governed by me. Not governed by your own worries and your own fears and all the rest of it. You're governed by me now. Well, it's an important place for us all to come to. I like what William Hendrickson said, great Bible scholar from many, many years ago. By the time this woman finally decided to cast her lot with Jesus, she had lost her health, her wealth, and because of the nature of her illness, also her standing in society, particularly the religious community, because her condition was such that it made her ceremonially unclean. And you can go back and look at Leviticus chapter 15 to give you that idea. All right. Well, we're moving on here. In the next couple of verses here, we see what happens with this young girl. In verse 30, I know I'm skipping around here a little bit. This is a pretty big passage. But in verse 28 it says, she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. Immediately the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction. Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? But his disciples said to him, you see the multitude thronging you, and you say, who touched me? A little bit of a humor there. And we know from other gospel accounts that it was Peter. Who else, right? Who else is going to open his mouth and insert his foot like that? It's got to be Peter. But he says, hey, everybody's touching you. What are you talking about, Jesus? The whole crowd is touching you. What do you mean, who touched me? And I think, it's interesting we have these disciples around Christ, and it just shows you how spiritually dull they are. Jesus has a sense that something miraculous has just happened, and something powerful has just happened, and the disciples are just kind of make their way through the crowd here. People get out of the way. They don't care. It's just all material to them. And what do you mean who touched you? Everybody's touching you. Come on, move through here. Out of the way, people. I mean, that's kind of how they saw things. They were there to manage the situation. Jesus was there to touch people and to heal people and to minister to people. And that's something that they had to learn as they went. Well, again, if I can only touch him, if I can only come to the end of myself, if I can only just reach out, I know he has the power. No one else has been able to do it. All the doctors, and you think about the superstitions back then. I mean, it's only been a couple hundred years that we stopped letting people's blood out when they had an illness. George Washington, classic example, he's sick, so they, open him up, let some blood drain out of there for a little while. And it ended up killing him. That was only a couple hundred years ago. You think about 2,000 years ago, all the weird stuff that doctors thought about then, and the cures and things. And she tried them all. She tried them all, but she wasn't any better. In fact, she had grown worse because of the things that they were doing or not doing to help her out. She was at the end. She was at the point of death. While the woman was afraid, it says there in verse 32, he looked around to see who had done this thing, but the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." While he was still speaking, it says, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house and said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And so we see faith at work in both of these situations. Your faith, daughter, your faith has made you well, has made you whole again. You go and be whole now. Be healed of your affliction. And now we have the ruler of the synagogue coming to that place. And you've got to know that when he heard those words, he might have had some faith up to that point. Boy, Jesus just healed this woman. I know that woman. She's got this flow of blood for a long time. And boy, she looks terrible. And now she looks great. And she's obviously healed. He must have just been buoyed by that, thinking, all right, come on, Jesus. Keep moving through this crowd. Out of the way, everybody. Make a hole. You know. But then the word comes. Don't bother him anymore. It's too late. It's too late. It's over. There was a chance back when she was still alive, but it's over now. There's no chance now. There's no hope. There's nothing. Just forget it. Let's just go home and let's bury your daughter because it's all over. But Jesus says, don't you listen to that. Don't you listen to that for 1 minute. You just keep on believing. You came to me with faith. You keep on believing. Don't be afraid. And that's what he says to each of us today. You've come to me in faith. You keep on believing. No matter how dark it gets, you keep on believing. Now, not being afraid, again, we look at the idea of healing, and it's a very mysterious thing. When God heals, the people he does heal, the people he doesn't heal, that's in God's hands, and we have no idea how all that works. We know that Paul, and again, I don't have time to go into the passage there, but Paul prayed and prayed. He had that thorn in the flesh. Actually, we do need to turn there. Let's go there for a second. 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians. Oh, I'm sitting here clicking all the way through this thing. Sorry. What was the passage again? 2 Corinthians. There we go. In that passage, Paul tells us, that's 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians works too, right? It says something different than yours, but anyway. 12:7 says, "Lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And so we know that the Lord allows these things in our lives for different reasons. We don't know exactly why. But we know that we can count on him, and that's really the question there. Can I come to a place of saying, God, your grace is sufficient for me? Even if I don't get healed of this issue of blood. Even if I don't receive a healing for this illness that is coursing through my body, that is all-consuming. Can I come to a place of just saying, Lord, your grace is sufficient for me? Can I come to a place of just coming to an end of myself and allowing the Lord to just do the work he wants to do in my life and be content with that? Because that's really at the crux of the Christian life. If I can come, as Paul here says, hey, I glory in my infirmities now. I glory in them because I know that when I'm weak, I'm strong, because it's the power of Christ working in and through me now that is able to do what he wants to do, and it brings a great testimony to those who are struggling with the same kind of issues. And I can now minister through the power of Christ and not through my own, hey, I've got all these revelations from the Lord and I've got, nothing wrong with me. My life's perfect and I got no problems at all. And then we become prideful. We become built up in pride. I can do this. I don't need Christ. I can do it on my own. It's a dangerous place to be. And so don't be afraid of whatever situation you're in. The Lord is there with you if you come to that place of brokenness. And so we see there, Jesus says, don't be afraid, only believe. And he permitted, verse 37, no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Interesting that Jesus brings those guys along because not too long from now, they're going to be on their own doing this stuff. Peter will have to go into the home of a woman named Dorcas and do almost an identical, just bringing this woman back from the dead. He says almost the same words. He clears everybody out of there and he says, hey, arise, arise. And you know that this time of serving alongside Jesus has brought him to that place of realizing God has the power to do this. It's not me. And so he went to that man that was crippled there in front of the temple. He says, I don't have any silver, I don't have any gold, but what I've got, I'll give it to you. Now get up. And he reaches down in faith, believing. I've seen what God can do. I've seen the power of God at work, and I know that I can reach down to this man and grab him by the hand and yank him up, and those legs are just going to be as healed and whole as when he was first born. And so Peter and James and John are there. And then he came into the house of the ruler of the synagogue and saw the tumult and those who wept and wailed loudly. When he came in, he said to them, why make this commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping. Wow, what a bold statement that was. What did they say? They ridiculed him. But when he had put them all outside, he took the father and the mother of the child and those who were with him and entered where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha Kumi, which is translated, little girl, I say to you, arise. Immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement. But he commanded them strictly that no one should know it, and said that something should be given her to eat. And so, don't be afraid, only believe. Even in the darkest of hours, even when things look absolutely dark and there's no hope whatsoever, she's dead. Forget about it. It's over. Jesus says, don't be afraid. Only believe. Keep on believing. And again, that reference there, Acts 9:40, is where Peter went into the home of Dorcas and kicked everybody out. Kicked the mockers out. Get everybody out of here. I want people in here that have faith to believe that God can do this thing. I think that's a very important thing to rest on there for a minute. The mockers are there. The wailers and the weepers are there. It's the darkest hour and the boo birds are coming out. And they're whining and complaining and weeping and moaning and saying all is lost. We as Christians, we need to be that salt in that situation. We need to be that light in that situation and say, hey, don't be afraid, just believe. We need to bring a calm to those storms. We certainly don't want to be the people that are right in the mix, weeping and wailing and mocking and ridiculing. Jesus put them out. I love what Philippians 4:1 says. I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned in the secret learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Paul wrote that from a jail cell. It's all right. I'm content to be here. All is not lost. It's not the darkest hour, because the Holy Spirit's dwelling right here in my heart, and everything's going to be okay. He's got full control over this situation. I know I can rest in him. I know I can trust in him, and I don't have to worry about a thing. I'm content. I know how to abound. I know how to live my life for the Lord and for his glory when I have lots of stuff and food and everything's taken care of. And I know how to do it when I'm in a jail cell and things look pretty bleak. And each one of us need to come to that place. But we can't come to that place if we're so consumed by ourselves. We need to come to that place of brokenness. Come to that place of just reaching out diligently to the Lord and giving it all to him, as we see the people in this story doing. When all others are weeping, when all others are wailing, and there's a commotion, there's a tumult, you, the Christian, you need to be the person of strength in that situation. And you need to be turning people to the Lord in that situation. It's a hard thing to do, because they will begin to mock you. What? Jesus. The mockers. They will ridicule you. It didn't bother Jesus. He was okay with it. He put them out. And I think, in every circumstance, we need to put that ridicule and put that lack of faith out of our lives to the largest degree that we can. Obviously, working with people that will ridicule your faith, there's not much you can do about that. But, we drink that stuff in like candy as we watch the Discovery Channel and all of the other documentary kind of shows out there that mock and ridicule our faith. We need to cast those things down, because that's spiritual warfare that is now going into our ears and into our minds and into our hearts. And we need to cast it out, because it causes a lack of faith on our part when these really hard times arise in our life. And we need to cast that stuff out. You think about 2 Corinthians 10 here. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. That's what you and I are about, pulling down strongholds in our lives and in the lives of others, not building them up. It goes on there, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Casting down imaginations, everything that exalts itself, everything that ridicules the knowledge of God, everything that mocks the knowledge of God, we need to cast it down. We need to cast it out of our lives. We need to take every one of those thoughts captive, because when we dwell on those thoughts and we allow those thoughts to foment in our lives, they make their way out. They make their way out into our lives. They manifest themselves in our lives in the form of doubt, in the form of lack of faith. Can God really do those things? Because I watched that documentary the other day, and I don't know. They question Christianity and, all that stuff. It's garbage. And it's a deliberate attack by Satan to weaken your faith and to weaken you in your faith. Be careful. Well, we see this girl coming back from the dead. It's wonderful. Because of her father diligently seeking after Jesus. Diligently coming to him. Falling at his feet, coming to a place of humility, coming to a place of, I don't care what this means to my current situation in my life. I want to follow Jesus diligently. I want to reach out to him, because he's the only person that can bring wholeness to this situation in my life. We'll close with that. Proverbs 8:17, I love those, the Lord speaking here, who love me. And those who seek me diligently find me. Amen to that.